Postmodernism within Photography by Keisha Tyler. What is postmodernism? Is this still, as it was classified 50 years ago, the age of anxiety, or has it finally settled into the quantum age of uncertainty? Postmodernism is largely a reaction to the assumed certainty of scientific or objective efforts to explain reality. Within this presentation, I would like to explore the works of one of the most iconic postmodernist photographers, Irving Penn, and those whom were influenced by and competed with him, such as Jimmy Nelson. Penn is a fantastic photographer, most commonly known for his work with Vogue as a fashion photographer and for his portrait work. Penn challenged and changed expectations of what a studio portrait can be. Very often, what lies behind the facade is rare and more wonderful than the subject knows or dares to believe. Irving Penn. In 1947 and 1948, Penn made a series of portraits that represented a major breakthrough in the history of photography. Penn began experimenting with the position of the subjects within the shot and started using an angular corner created by an intersection of theatre flats. This method of positioning allows the viewer's eye to be pulled directly to the subject. Any gesture is emphasized, and small details in the subject's stance become more accentuated. This attention to detail and experimentation within the portrait was explored further in Penn's project, Worlds in a Small Room. Looking at Penn's World in a Small Room, it is still to this day considered the most influential photo book ever made. It is noted for the photographs which show Penn's immaculate, premeditated style, his love of geometry, and the balance of light and dark. It is equally monumental for the profound way in which Penn attempts to engage the world. Looking into Penn's fashion photography background, it is understandable that when he first embarked on this adventure, he began by seeking out a studio. Penn started by photographing the clientele of the studio, but instead of taking money from them, he gave them money to take the photograph. This was common of Penn, but also other photographers as well, for example, Philip Larco di Cario. By introducing a studio, you are creating control and isolation. You can remove all the surrounding distractions and introduce a sense of intimacy and stability. It takes you back to the relationship between the subject and the photographer. It becomes a neutral area for all involved. As Penn became more invested in his work, he began travelling further afield, and it became increasingly difficult for Penn to gain access to a studio. And as this was very important for his work, he made a pop-up studio that he could take anywhere with him. By creating a pop-up studio, Penn was taking subjects out of their natural surroundings and therefore taking away that pressure to act the part and play up to the stereotypes that they think a photographer wants to show within their photographs. This was not the case for Penn. Photographs never appear without a notion of truth attached to them. When Penn's subjects entered the studio, they became their true selves. On its neutral ground, they emerged as their real selves, human beings possessed of innate dignity. Irving Penn. Penn continuously emphasized the transformations in the studio. He was very careful not to make any claims about the studio being any more real or true than outside the studio. The differences are the change in the formalities, environments, and seriousness created by the studio. Interestingly, if we look at other photographers such as Jimmy Nelson, it is the space outside the studio that was real. If we look at Nelson's work, particularly before they pass away, he focuses on photographing the individuals and groups within their surroundings and makes the picture very much about the setting and acting up to the camera. The photographs taken by Nelson are more akin to high fashion than reality. Nelson claims that it's the irreplaceable ethnographic record of a fast disappearing world. Is wrong from pretty much every angle. These photographs are just a photographer's fantasy, bearing little relationship either to how these people appear now or how they've ever appeared. Of course, rendering people more exotic than they really are is a time-worn tradition. Stephen Curry. Unfortunately, I agree with Curry's statement. It is common for photographers to exaggerate the truth in their photographs and attempt to portray the subjects as more interesting as to show off their work and gain more recognition. Nelson attempted to romanticize and ultimately dehumanize the subjects he was photographing, despite him believing that he was doing the complete opposite. Nelson was criticized by many of the tribes he photographed for suggesting that they were dying out. In contrast, Penn's work was very sympathetic to the tribes. He stated, "These remarkable strangers would come to me and place themselves in front of my camera, and in this clear north sky I would take records of their physical presence. The pictures would survive us both, and at least to that extent, something of their already dissolving cultures would be preserved forever." Penn has had a major influence on photographers around the globe, from his invention of the curved backdrop and the use of a portable studio to emphasize the individuality and personality of his subjects. Much like the pictures of the remarkable strangers, Penn's legacy of most iconic and influential post-modernist photographer of the 20th century will live on. A good photographer is one that communicates a fact, touches the heart, and leaves the viewer a changed person for having seen it. It is, in one word, effective. Irving Penn.